Thinking Basketball Podcast. My name is Ben. Welcome back to what is, I think, the craziest show we do every year. In theory, we're live right now for members. Who knows if I can hit the buttons properly every week? That's an adventure. It's telling us we're live. But the reason I mention this is because we are going to do our top 25 players under 25, which we've done for the last few seasons and has been without a doubt. Cody, you get the nicest messages after this podcast, right?
Well, honestly, I somehow get to avoid all of them. Like, I think even the hate mail that's supposed to come to me is sent to you.
It's true,
and probably addressed to you. So I get to avoid all of it.
Yes, they're very long messages and deeply personal. They're sent to my house. It is the craziest episode. I think it evokes more emotions than any other episodes, the young players, and especially because we do it a little differently. I think it's a little bit more vanilla or cookie cutter when you say we're going to project the players going forward. We're going to pick our favorite players under 25 going forward. And then, for years it was like, well, Luka Doncic is number one. That's easy. And now, it'd probably be something like Victor Wembanyama. He's a pretty good prospect. But that's not what we're doing. We do the top 25 players, and we want to check in on where we think they are right now as players. And so this means if we were heading into the playoffs in any real meaningful competitive sense, basically what would our draft board look like for players that we want on a playoff team to help us march through the playoffs, provide value, win a championship in that setting? Is there anything I'm forgetting about our criteria before we just go hog wild?
Well, this is the dirty secret about this pod, Ben. Like we have this idea where it's like we're checking in to see how everyone's doing right now, but also we're going to project them forward to see how they do in a playoff setting.
Well, the playoffs start today, right?
But also we kind of think back to how they've done in the past to try and inform it, but we want to lean a little bit more towards how they're doing right now. But even if somebody's injured right now, maybe we'll say, we saw enough to think that they're good enough. So there's some bendy rules, and I think some of them will be applied harsher to others. And then some of them will be like, I don't know, I drafted him because he seemed great. So there's a lot of, I don't know, if you're like keeping track with like some strict like originalist rule set here, good luck, because we're just rolling with it right now. And a lot of this is going to be vibes. A lot of it's going to be numbers. But at the end of the day, we're all just going to be happy and merry.
I know why you're saying that. You're taking this too far. It's because there are players that have already established themselves at a certain level that are injured, that haven't played that many. And I'm not talking about 20 of 28 games or 14 of 28 games. We're talking about 5 or 10 games is all we've seen from them. And maybe they haven't even really played this year at all. I'll get to that in a second. There are 102 players in the league that qualify under the age of 25. That's the criteria that I did not mention specifically. So you have to be in your age 25 season or under to qualify for this episode the way we do these picks every year, which means if you're Darius Garland and you turn 25 on January 26th, it's your age 25 season, you're too old. So you have to be 24 or under on Basketball Reference this year. That's just the way. I mean, they made it up. I don't know. We just all follow it. February 1st. They're the numbers gods, so we go with it. And if you look at that right now, of all the players who played 270 minutes this season, that's 200 and something players, like almost 300 players in the league, 38% of them qualify. So we have a good chunk of the league to look at, but of course, many of them are young players, and 4 of them have already made an all-star team. Anthony Edwards has made 2, Tyrese Halliburton has made 2, Tyrese Maxey has made 1, and LaMelo Ball has made an all-star game. Those are the 4 players to make an all-star team. Did Zion ever make an all-star team? Would he be number 5?
Has he made an I was actually pretty shocked when you said that Ball made an all-star team. I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, he made an all-star team a couple years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember if it was like a commissioner's pick. Yeah, Zion has made 2. The reason he wasn't in my list, of course, is because Zion did not qualify in the 38% of the players that I was talking about, because he has only played 6 games this season. So that's what Cody's alluding to here is, what are we going to do? Like, do you trust the previous level of these players? How do we do this? So that's the gray area. It is very difficult because you're looking at a moving target in that sense. But the tradition around here is that Cody flips some kind of digital coin We don't get to see it. We just trust that he knows how to flip the coin. And well, did you flip a real coin last year? Maybe we had a real coin. I
definitely don't have one. But just to add a little bit more context, you said that Zion has played 6 games this year. And that's a really important number to remember, because there's another guy that has played 5 games this season. And there's a chance that this other guy goes a little bit higher just based on how much he's played. So that's part of we'll get to it. We'll get to all these guys and have our conversations. I'm expecting.
Wait, who's played 5 games? Now I feel like I'm forgetting someone.
Paulo Banchero has played 5 games.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot that he even existed as a basketball player. He's even harder, right?
Yeah,
because he has a much smaller career to choose from. He's earlier in the aging curve, and then in the first 5 games, he looked, I think, fairly improved in a lot of key areas. Oh, but it was only 5 games, so yes, there are some players that this becomes very difficult with.
Okay, so. Wait, am I just doing a digital coin flip? Is that
let's do the digital coin flip, and then we'll start the draft.
Is there any way you can do it? I should have asked you this ahead of time. Could you do it like on the stream, or are people just gonna have to trust me?
I mean, I'm sure, Cody, technically there's a way to use that basic technology that we have and show it on the screen. That would be very fun. But in this case, we'll just trust you.
All right, everyone, you just got to trust me on this one.
That's what he says every year. I love it.
Listen, it's all man's got. It's all man's got is his honesty, and I'm holding that. So I'm clicking on this. Just to be fair, I don't know if this is going to screw stuff up, but I clicked on the site earlier just to test it, and it automatically just flipped and it went tails. I don't know if that's going to impact your decision. So I'm going to click on it again. Yeah. Ben, what do you want to call?
I'll call heads.
You're going to call heads. So I'm going to click on this, and it lands on heads. Ben, you get the first pick, which actually makes me really sad because I wanted the first pick, actually.
Can I trade you the first pick? I don't want the first pick. This is horrible pressure.
Can we do that?
I don't know. Why did we even flip? We should have rigged the flipping. I didn't know you wanted the first pick. Okay, first pick. I will say that there were a couple players I considered for the first pick. I don't want to list too many names. I do want to sort of go back and forth on some of these players with you, and we will get into them in detail. I might ask you some questions before I pick. I won't always commit to a pick, but I think if I have the first pick, Cody, I just have to come out of the gate just absolutely swinging. I do. Yeah.
This is going to break my heart.
It's not going to break your heart at all. It's not going to break your heart. I am going to take, with the first pick, I'm going to take Victor Wembanyama with the first pick.
This is genuinely heartbreaking, Ben. Like I had an epiphany. I had my big board set up this whole time. I had somebody else lined up.
I know.
And I was like, I'm just gonna dive back in. I'm gonna check in on Wemby a little bit.
No, you were gonna take him number 1 too?
He was gonna be number 1.
Yeah. I will say it's close. I will say there were some other players that I considered, but I mean, defensively, he's just how many players we talked about this on the Defensive Player of the Year prediction episode a couple weeks back. Not many players in the league can make a claim to be better defensively. He's continuing to grow with the playmaking and the shooting, and still not a great shooter. But when you start to see, like Cody, 89% from the free throw line for a 7'4" player, the mid-range numbers are up in connection with that so far into the season, about a quarter of the way we're about a third of the way through the season now, right? He's played about 27, 28 games. So we're about a third of the way through the season. The thing that's interesting, of course, with Wemby as he continues to evolve as a player is the 3-point shooting. The Spurs want him to take a lot. He wants to take a lot. He wants to be an inside and outside threat. I think the pull-up 3-point shot for how young he is and how big he is already pretty good. The open catch and shoot, just like how much do you trust this dude to space the floor and knock down threes? That's still a work in progress. But the big one for me is just the Spurs being better, him making them more competitive. And when he has the proper sort of infrastructure around him, like the Chris Paul lineups, they look fantastic. I think he's the safest pick.
I don't want to spend too much time on his defense here because like we all get it. We know. But I was watching the Timberwolves game. I think it was 2 days ago. I think it was 2 days ago between the Timberwolves and the Spurs. And even now, even though Wemby's been in the league for a season and a third at this point, Jaden McDaniels is like in the paint. There's a couple of times where he's like near the rim and he's like, oh, sweet. I have like a shot right? Like I have a clear look at it. There's a couple of guys hanging out by the basket, but I think I have a good enough look. And then Wemby just materializes. Like the speed at which he gets super high is just beyond anything that we've basically ever seen, right? So you can throw up this little floater and you're like, oh, the guy's on the other side of the lane. Like I'm easily going to, he's just all of a sudden there blocking it. There's one where Julius Randle is kind of just like hanging out and he does this little like 10-foot fadeaway sort of thing. And Wemby's out of the picture. And the last second, he just jumps up and blocks the fadeaway at the apex. You can argue with me about whether or not it was a goaltend, but it was close enough that you're like, wow, this guy, I mean, it's unbelievable. He's truly a defense unto himself. And I think if you go into a playoff scenario, I mean, you can at least bank on that. And if you talk about like flexibility, you can do whatever you want with that. You got Wemby out there, like throw it anyone else out there. Things are going to work out just fine.
I love how you said I don't want to spend too much time on the defense, and then you did a 3-minute like slam poem ode on like how amazing. Can you do an ode and a slam poem at the same time? Are those the opposite things? I don't know anything about poetry. What am I saying? I've dug myself a hole. Yeah, go ahead.
So I mean, I don't know if this biases me, right? The numbers all look good. Like he has the corpse of Chris Paul out there, and their numbers on the court together are just incredible. But like, he brings me so much joy when I watch him play basketball. Like his defense, like genuinely makes me cackle when I watch. It's like watching Jokic like make passes, right? I'm just like, this is unbelievable. This is just it's the holiday spirit just watching Victor Wembanyama play defense. But you talked about the shooting, Ben. On the other side, passing. And I know you've talked about that he's had this nice like passing ability since he played for the French team, but you know, off the dribble, pick and roll, left-handed, tight pocket pass between defenders. Like he's cutting to the basket, catches it, bobbles a little bit, still dumps it off for an open layup. I mean, I'm not saying he's a perfect passer. I think his passing ability outweighs his turnovers right now because he's a little bit loose on that end. I think the turnovers could be brought down, but like the vision and his audacity and his will to try and make these passes, sky's the limit with that dude, Ben. Sky's the limit.
I think it's crazy that he's about to turn 21 and we have an under 25 draft to choose from. And we're both saying that he's 3 years ahead of the other players basically in this category. And I think that speaks to his aging curve, his all-time trajectory that he potentially has if he continues to improve, because just historically great defensive player obviously is on the table. And then offensively, he's still fascinating to me. I actually think that in a different environment, you might end up seeing what we would think of as more valuable or better offense. Certainly, maybe the statistical profile would be different, right? But to your point, there's still a little bit of experimentation. The game looks like it is starting to slow down for him a little bit when I just throw him on a Thursday night on a West Coast game, and it's like, oh yeah, Wemby's what? Wemby has like 20. What? He has 24 and 14 with 6 blocks. I didn't even really notice. He's just kind of doing his thing. And I noticed that cool pass he made when he got the wraparound pick and roll play, but there's still like he's got to get stronger. He's got to get stronger with the ball. He's still trying things that are a little out there, and some of that is not having great players around him. Like you said, if you just plugged him into a playoff team, if the Celtics were like, Chris Stepp's injured, but let's throw Wemby out there, I mean, it would just be horrifying, right? So I do think, all things considered, like I said, the safe pick is the word that comes to mind, because there's some other fantastic players in this range in my head. And this I don't know about you, Cody, but in my head, I'm thinking like, are we talking about all NBA players, even though these guys are really young? That's kind of the range where I started this at.
So let me ask one more question about Wemby before we move on. I don't want to spoil too much about the All-Star and Sub-All-Star episode, or the Sub-All-Star episode we'll have. To me, Wemby feels pretty comfortably like at an All-Star level. But would you bump him up higher? Do you feel like he's playing at like an All-NBA level right now?
I think it's on the fringe. Yeah. I mean, this is the kind of thing that makes this exercise so hard, which is part of why we do it. It would be a lot easier if we just had like really polished, beautiful samples and things were smoothed out. But it's fun to do it 25 games in or 30 games into a season. We kind of always do this in December because you get enough of the season to start to get a feel for what's happening. But it's like, hey, some guy could have 20 games of really hot shooting, or, the numbers look very different 2 or 3 months later. Is this an aberration or is this real? Or someone has a slow start. We'll get to these players. Someone has a slow start and you say, yeah, but I've seen it before. I'm not too worried about that slow start from this player. So to me, there's some wiggle room there, but yeah, that's exactly the range we're talking about. Like, is this a guy or maybe multiple players we talk about who could be on all NBA teams at the end of the year.
All right, so moving on to the second pick here.
Very easy second pick time for Cody. I mean, this is you have the world's your oyster. You could just take anyone you want in the NBA.
Well, I know there's one guy that people are probably screaming about, but I do think, like, if we slow down and really think about it, it's
are they screaming or are they howling? That's my question.
Listen, if I had that first pick, I was going to stare Minnesota straight in the eye socket and make that Wembanyama pick without blinking and happily go back out into my Minnesota world. But I don't know. I do think it's a really interesting conversation because I have complicated feelings about the guy I'm about to pick. And I'm just going to go for it, Ben. You know, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to probably keep people happy at this point. I'm just going to take Anthony Edwards, number 2.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I think if you had won the coin toss and apparently you were going to take Wemby, I had a decision to make, but I think I too would have taken Anthony Edwards, number 2. Are you feeling really good about it? Did you almost have him at number 1 on your board? Because he's a fascinating player right now. The whole 25 games into a new season thing applies to him heavily.
I think until maybe even a couple days ago, Anthony Edwards was my number 1 pick. Like I was pretty confident that he was going to be the guy that I was going to throw out there with the first pick if I had it. So it was pretty close, right? But it's not, I wouldn't also say it's a 2-man race. Like I think there were a couple other guys I was considering here. I think the weird thing with Edwards, I'm going to ask you about this, is you're considering Ant at number 1 biasing more towards from what you've seen in the past or what's been going on this season?
Yes, it is understanding that we are now talking about a player who has playoff experience, had a deep playoff run last year. Yes, he's still only 23, but is it his 5th season? I mean, he's been around for a while, right? Mm-hmm. So it is taking into account the player arc that I've seen in the past and then trying to understand what that level was consistently. What does it mean? And then, like, why have his play style indicators changed so much to start this season? He's taking way more pull-up threes. We obviously know about that. The overall three-point volume is very high. He's shooting like 42% from downtown, which is crazy. But the other, like, shooting indicators for Anthony Edwards make me go, I don't know if Anthony Edwards is going to be like a volume 40% plus pull-up three-point shooter. And then there's this other weird thing that goes directly in hand with the pull-up shooting, which is his lack of rim pressure this year. It's alarming. For Patreon subscribers, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball, we have a board that looks at the trends from last year to this year. And if you pull it up for Anthony Edwards and you look at the rim category, it's not only all orange or red, meaning that they're all declines from a year ago, but he's under the 10th percentile in almost every category. Like, the drop-off in his drive efficiency is ginormous. The drop-off in his rim efficiency, I mean, 11% worse at the rim this year compared to last year. He's taking fewer shots at the rim, way less of his offense, 10% less than last year of Anthony Edwards' offense comes from the free throw line or the rim area as part of his overall offensive field goal attempts. And these are just monstrous drop-offs. And obviously on the surface, it's like, well, yeah, he's biasing toward the pull-up 3 so far this year. That might be a regular season thing. It might be experimental. It might be another layer that he's adding to his game. But also, and I think Minnesota's playing better lately, and they've looked much better. But also you look at them and you're like, Karl Anthony Towns isn't there anymore. And that spacing ain't quite what it used to be, is it? And like, it's really hard to just drag yourself to the basket every time over and over again. So, Cody, to answer your question, it's heavily based on where I've seen him, but there's a little uncertainty because also by the end of last year, like, I'm not exactly sure. I wanted another season of that Anthony Edwards to understand where he was, and now I'm getting a slightly different Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, it's very interesting seeing, like, Karl Anthony Towns go to the Knicks, and all of a sudden people are like, maybe this guy's actually pretty solid at playing basketball. It's like maybe the offensive context of a center like that helps a little bit. And that's a huge part of it. Like, I look at the team, and I think this is where I give Ant the benefit of the doubt. I've been saying this since the preseason pod, Ben. This is just not the right team construction for Anthony Edwards to thrive and flourish, right? Like, you look at the point guard and pass, specifically the passing, like not necessarily the point guard. Like, Mike Conley is out there. I think we're seeing quite a big of a dip from him. Anthony Edwards is having to take a lot of the point guard-ish burden And that's just not where he thrives. Like, he's better when he has these guys like Kyle Anderson, Karl Anthony Towns, things like that can make these great passes, these great connective tissue passes around him. Because right now, the way that he's playing out there, like, Julius Randle is a great example of differentiating between different kinds of passers, between like on-ball passers and connective tissue passers. Because Julius Randle, you give him the ball, he can make some nice passes. He can throw some lobs to Rudy Gobert, right? He can do some wraparound type stuff. But in terms of like the quick connective tissue, the ball's whirring around type of thing, he doesn't necessarily scream that for me, right? And Anthony Edwards is kind of the same way, but if he's around other guys that can do that, I think he thrives a lot more with trying to catch a defense that's off guard. That's when he becomes completely unstoppable, right? So I'm like, okay, I think he's in a really bad offensive context. Last year in the playoffs, I'm still biased a lot towards the 8-10 game sample, where the Michael Jordan sample, we can call it. We're like, all right, so this guy can clearly dial it up in the playoffs. And of course, he can dial up the defense in the playoffs as well. Like, that's a huge part of it. Like, he is not a defensive burden on a team. Can he make mistakes? Is he perfect? Is he all NBA defense? No, but he's not taking things off the table compared to some of these guys that can be hunted when you get into playoff matchups. So you kind of take all of that, and I'm like, I still feel really confident that this is a good player.
I think the passing thing is so fascinating. We could probably have an entire episode or separate pieces of content on diving into what you said about the different context of good and bad passing. You know, the on ball with these specific rote reads I'm comfortable with, or Randall likes to bang around in the post. The Knicks and even the Timberwolves often had a side completely cleared out for him. And so it's like you learn certain passes off the dribble that are different than a more dynamic extra pass, that connective tissue or an advanced pass or something where it's happening very quickly and you're connecting two parts of the court. You're connecting what's happening with the ball with what's happening with a cutter or a help defender over here. And this is different than transition passing and on and on and on. It's very interesting to really sort of break it down like that, because I think it applies to Ant, where Ant is a player who doesn't have like terrible vision, and he's capable of making passes that can hit a highlight reel. But I think his whole career, he's struggled with pressure or more complicated reads. And he still kind of reminds me of like where Jason Tatum was about 4 years ago or so, where it's like you can trap him or show him pressure and he's not going to be able to hit the extra dimensions of a defense when he has the ball. So the first dimension might be a basic pass or hitting the roll man. The second dimension might be hitting the player coming out of the corner based on how that first help defender is reacting. The final dimension is like, I can read all the help defenders and I got the whole defense shifting and I can go to any corner. I can hit cutters. It doesn't matter what they throw at me. Tatum, remember, added that like one-handed off the dribble skip pass into the corner. The difference is Tatum's like 7'5". I don't know if you've ever stood next to him. He's just the biggest human being ever. I don't understand it. No, he's like 6'8" or 6'9". He's just giant. And Ant actually plays a little bigger than he is, I think. He's like more like 6'4". And so I wonder sometimes how much height can bother players like that. Of course, he's an extraordinary athlete, but when you jump and get in the air, then you can get in trouble. I think we see a similar thing with like Devin Booker or to some degree Kevin Durant. That kind of ball pressure can throw him off. So if I had to nitpick, that's where my questions are. But otherwise, I mean, I think he's established himself as an impact player, as a star player, as a guy who can, dominate playoff defenses with his athleticism, et cetera, et cetera.
And as a final point, just to show that it's impossible to just like take each discrete part of basketball and be like, here's how he is as a passer, here's how he is as a defender, blah, 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 blah. The fact that his rim numbers are down this year impacts the passes that he's able to make, right? Because he's so much better of a passer, just like anyone would be, when he's getting downhill and everyone's like, what do we do about Anthony Edwards, right? Like that, when that athleticism, when that train is going downhill, it just opens up so many more passing lanes. And when you're relying a lot more on the pull-up three, there's just not a lot of passing lanes that are open to you in those kinds of situations.
All right, we have to move with a little more alacrity. We always take forever on this episode. We get too excited.
I do want to say, I think you actually have the most difficult pick of the entire draft right now.
Oh my God, this is amazing, because this to me is the easiest pick of the entire draft. This will be the easiest pick I think I make all day.
Then yes. I know who you're going with. That.
Well, listen, I want to hear more about why you think it's so difficult, because I was very comfortable with all of the moving parts taking place with the third pick here being Jalen Williams, J-Dub from the Oklahoma City Thunder. He's playing center. He's playing point guard. He's got the mid-range. He plays with pace. He's an incredible passer. He's a great defender. Is there anything this guy cannot do? He is sort of, what generation is he from, Cody? Is he Gen Z? Is that what we call it? I can't even figure out.
I don't even know what his age is. I think he's Gen Z though.
Well, he's under 25. We know that. Yeah. So he's a Gen Z Ginobili. That's what I was going for there. Gen Z Ginobili. The guy just does everything. He's so good. And I think the biggest question for me with J-Dub is just really like, I have to see it in the playoffs. But what I've seen at the start of this season makes me think we're going to see good stuff in the playoffs.
Yeah, you say that Gen Z Ginobili, but also if you took Ginobili and just like stretched him, like just added some to his wingspan, you added some to his height, and then all of a sudden you got Gen Z Ginobili out here. I think what's interesting about him, a couple of things. Number one, we've talked about this with Jaylen Brown a couple of times, but some of the like impact on off stuff, you might look at it and you'll be like, oh, why is a guy that Ben and Cody are obsessed with just like not killing it in this game? It's like, well, when you have a really good team, and especially you're playing with somebody who's just a plus minus god like Shea, kind of throws everything out of whack, right? Like because you're playing with Tatum and you're going to be playing separate minutes, like it's going to be tougher. When you're playing separate minutes from Shea, it's going to be tougher for you to rack up some of that plus minus stuff. That doesn't explain all of it, I know, but I know that's part of it. The other thing that I want to talk, you want to say something?
Yeah, before you get to the other thing, it's funny. I don't think we've actually talked about Jalen Williams much this year. That's just mostly Cody and I texting each other every time Jalen Williams. So you're like, Ben and Cody are obsessed with Jalen Williams, and the rest of the audience is like, really? They never even mention him. You know, if the Thunder had those rabid fans that some of those other cities, we won't mention their names right now. We see you though. If they had those rabid fans, they'd be sending us messages every week about how we hate Jalen. There's probably, now that I say that, there's probably a Reddit thread about how I hate Jalen Williams. So continue, Cody.
But you know, I think his on off right now. He's posting a negative number. It's like -4.5 or something like that. Trying to pull it up, but anyway.
Yeah, if you use the basketball reference calculation, it's something like -4. But I assume the point you're going to counter with is that when he's on the court, the Thunder are outscoring people by 11 points per 100, right? So you get this classic thing that you see on these all-time teams where you might pull up a year and you might be like, Scottie Pippen on off +3. That doesn't sound very good. And then you look at the other column and you're like +14. When he's on the court, there's only so much you can actually, like when your team is just stacked and that good. So yes, it's a little concerning, but also not really that concerning yet.
Talking about on off, especially with Shea, what's interesting is you look at some of the numbers when Shea's off the court and J-Dub is like the main offensive engine. His numbers don't look that different in terms of like scoring and creation for other people. If you look at just raw assists per 75 and points per 75, he does not jump up that much. Like he doesn't show incredible indicators of being like the primary offensive guy. In fact, his efficiency, if anything, skyrockets when he's on the court with Shea, right? And I think in the context of this conversation, I love that. I'm like, this is great. You got a guy that can do all these things. He can protect the rim at the forward position. He can guard basically anyone in the modern type of NBA. He can space the floor, and he just fits next to these guys. He can fit next to this like all-time isolation master and still look this good and efficient. Like this is the whole thing about building a playoff context. You got a guy like that flexibility in so many different contexts. And it's like, I'm going to take that basically any time of the day.
Cody, I'm interested to get your take on this. I'm not sure there's a number 2 we're going to discuss in this under 25 draft that I would rather have, maybe besides Wemby because of the defense, than Jalen Williams. Like if you have a superstar and you get to put someone next to him and make your team as good as possible with your top 2 players, I'm not sure you can do much better than J-Dub.
What about, I don't know if you're going to say.
Are you going to pick now? Is this going to be amazing?
No.
If you segue this into your pick.
I wasn't going to say, I could, but I'm not going to. What if like Anthony Edwards was a number 2? Or do you just say he's just kind of a built-in number 1?
No, I'm saying if Anthony Edwards was a number 2 and I could have Anthony Edwards or Jalen Williams, and I know this is the thing sometimes that's super challenging for people to digest. Whether I'm right or wrong in my analysis, I think the reality is this exists. We've seen this historically with players where a bigger name or 2 superstars come together and it doesn't fit as well. The Jordan Pippen thing works better than the Jordan never got to play with another player at that level, but sometimes it's just not always the case that you can throw Anthony Edwards out there with another guy like Anthony Edwards and Shea. I don't think Anthony Edwards would be as good. The simple reason to start with, defensively, I think Jalen Williams is more versatile and probably better. Second, he's a much better shooter. And third, he's a better passer, playmaker, and probably better secondary attacker. Now, Edwards is really good in that because if he gets a step and he gets downhill, he's just crazy. But Jalen Williams is so good in those spots, understanding feeling and cutting, going on the move, catching on the move and throwing a lob pass, a bounce pass to the cutter, finishing over the middle. There's just so many areas there that I think when you start to become the secondary player, he's better than just so many guys across the board. And that's part of what makes him so good.
So, Ben, why do you think Jalen Williams should have gone second in this draft?
No, but he was the other guy that I considered. I mean,
Okay.
so sure, he could have gone second. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I personally have these three players that we talked about flirting on this all NBA line. And just because you're in that ballpark, I mean, I think a little bit higher, a little bit lower on somebody, and you could easily reshuffle this order.
Yeah, this is currently my 1, 2, 3. So I'm feeling pretty good.
Okay, so are you are you stalling for number 4? What's happening right now?
I think this is where we're going to diverge. I think we're going to have a little bit of a difference. I think we're going to have a difference.
It only took 30 minutes.
I'm gonna pluck away one of our little injured guys right now. I'm gonna take them and say I've seen enough to believe it.
It's gonna be amazing.
I'm gonna take Chet Holmgren.
That's my number 4.
Number 4. I'm taking Chet Holmgren, number 4.
Yeah. This is getting very confusing because I'm keeping track of the draft, but it also looks identical to my draft board.
Wait, you said you had him number 4?
I would have picked Chet. If we had flipped the order, I would have picked Chet. Yeah.
I mean, the way that he started the season, I love rim protection. I just do. I think if you have
do?
A guy,
I never knew that.
Yeah. If you can rim protect, if you can also step out in the perimeter, but you can also do offensive things off the ball while not taking away from the other offensive guys. Because guess what? He plays with the Jalen Williams we just talked about. Guess what? He also plays with the isolation master, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And when they're all out there together, it looks great. Like their defense, they had like an under 100 defensive rating.
Yeah, I think it was 99. On the court.
Yeah, a 99 defensive rating when he was on the court. We've talked about just how good the rest of the roster is, but he's at the center of that, literally as the center, right? And then just the archetype of being able to space the floor as a good defensive player like that is so rare, especially when you get to a playoff setting. And I know last year in the playoffs, he shot like sub 30%. So we're like, all right, maybe he's going to fall into that category as well. But you also saw the development of like putting the ball on the court, throwing some of those dump off type of passes, just attacking closeouts. And like you said, I don't know if there's a number 2 that you'd want more. I'm kind of looking at Chet and I'm like, I think he'd be an interesting number 2 here besides J-Dub and Wemby.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think after those guys, I mean, you know, I think you're very upset that you and I have the same top 4 because usually we start diverging right away. I think the thing is, Chet looked like an all-star player to me to start the year. He looked like a good all-star. Now, I will say this, Cody, because now I think stuff is about to get really crazy. Mm-hmm. If I had the 2nd and 4th pick, if I was on evens instead of odds in our little draft format here, I would have considered 5 players for this spot. Okay. And I did when setting up my board. So there's sort of a like 5 players I looked at, and then what's going on. You know, what should I do after that? So I don't know if you want to jump into those other 5 players or you want me to draft based on what I have, but like, I think if you say Chet is an all-star level player, there are other all-star level players or in consideration for this level of player to be picked here at the number 4 or I guess number 5 slot.
So I think you're right about that, but the difference is that Chet to me seems more proven as a guy that can fit next to other high-end talent a little bit better. Like I still have a lot of questions about what happens if you put this player in a much better offensive or defensive context. What happens if they go into a playoffs? Chet feels a little, even though it's only his like 2nd year playing right now, I still feel like he's a little bit more proven. Were you just going to say the 5 players and then we were going to sort it out, or were you just going to jump to your next pick?
I it's risky because you might not have the same 5 players. So, but I do kind of at parts of this draft feel like I want to talk about things that are very fluid, right? They're very fluid. Like here's what's going to happen. We're going to come up with our draft and we're going to rank the next few players, quote unquote, rank the next few players. And then people are going to like make a thread about that. And they're going to see someone at 4 and someone at 8 or 9. And they're going to be like, oh my God, these guys are drinking Kool-Aid. But what I'm saying is I mean, hey, we may be drinking Kool-Aid anyway. We should probably start doing that live on the show. As long as Kool-Aid pays us, that would be fantastic. Kool-Aid, send it over. When was the last time you had Kool-Aid?
Like, are you talking about you mixed like the powder in there and mix it around, or
isn't
you buy,
that
like,
it? Is there another way to get Kool-Aid?
I don't even know. I've never been much of a like punch type of fruit drink
Me
type
neither.
of person.
Yeah.
What's the orange one? That's what was it called? You mixed it. Tang?
Ones?
Do you remember Tang?
Yeah, no, I didn't enjoy Tang. No.
Do people still drink Tang? Is that real?
I liked High C. Is that a thing?
So that's like in the juice pouch, right? Like,
yeah. When I was like
so.
4, I liked High C.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that was
you're with me on that.
Going to like a 10th grade soccer game, not 10th grade, like a 10-year-old soccer game. You just get like a bunch of fruit punches.
Hey, when you played soccer as a kid, what was the food du jour? What did you always have on the sideline?
Wait, that I had, or that like people brought to share?
Both. Did you bring your own snacks when you were a young Socceroo?
Well, here's the thing. I didn't start playing soccer or basketball till I was like in my young teens, actually.
That's too old. You missed
much
it.
later.
Yeah.
But I was a big banana guy.
Okay. Okay. We were looking for orange slices. I was curious if that is just a universal thing.
That's classic.
That has inundated youth soccer. Anyway, I'm just stalling, Cody, because I have the 5th pick. Why do I have to do this? Okay. With the 5th pick, I will take.
We're definitely different on this one. I know it.
Yeah, we're gonna be different on this one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take. Well, see this. I'm gonna take it and stick with it. But I want you to. You're gonna talk me through different things, and I'm gonna change my mind.
Good.
Yeah, because there's a handful of players here that are tricky. I'll take Tyrese Maxey.
Whoa! Yeah. Oh, I did not see that coming.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can I tell you where I had him on my board?
I think you're allowed to do that.
Is that cheating?
No, it's not cheating.
This is just opening me up to get just flamed.
This is great.
I had him 14.
Okay, well, we have to talk about this. This is amazing.
14. Okay.
So it sounds like you are like, I'm gonna interpolate some stuff here. Mm-hmm. You are looking at his stats this season, which are terrible, and going right, and then also going, well, I have questions about his defense, and Philly stinks, so this player isn't that good.
Not good isn't quite what I would say. I think
isn't that good.
I think a lot of these guys are quite good, but I think in general, my belief, especially in shorter guards, that aren't necessarily like incredible high-end passers, I'm just a little bit more like, what is the high-end ceiling that you have? Because I think he played extremely well when Embiid was healthy last year, and I thought the way that he was able to play, even when Embiid was down for stretches, he looked incredible. And I thought, especially when Embiid was out there in the handoff actions that they were able to run, his ability to just fly off these kind of off-ball things and just attack the rim with like speed that only maybe 5 other guys can. I thought it was spectacular. His shooting ability, even defensively, I think he at least brings it. Like, he plays with a high motor and he tries, and all of that stuff's really good. But we've seen a huge dip this year. You bake in my skepticism of just like the archetype I was talking about. It just takes a couple of notches off.
I love this. I don't really trust the dip this year. I don't trust it. I think the waters are what's the word? There's some weird stuff in the waters in Philadelphia right now. The thing has been a disaster. Mm-hmm. It's not looking good. And I think that has contributed to some bumpy starts. But having seen a decent number of 76ers games, I would say I have not lost confidence in Maxey. Don't forget, Maxey was a guy last year in the playoff series, 44 minutes a game, 30 points a game, 7 assists a game. I mean, I think in a little bit in the same way with like a John Morant, I think his skills translate to high-level basketball. Like, he's just crazy quick. He's a really good shooter. He's really good off the dribble from deep range. Is he a good passer, playmaker? Not really, but it's not terrible. And to your point, last year, yes, with Embiid, things were very good. But Cody, without Embiid, he was so let me give you the numbers. He was 21 points per 75 on just about average efficiency with Embiid, and they had a 125 offensive rating when they were on the floor together. When Embiid went to the bench, he actually he played 1,700 minutes without Joel Embiid last year, averaged 29 points per 75 all of our playmaking sort of estimates that we have, passer rating, all that stuff were the same. Efficiency was almost exactly the same, right around league average, and they had a 118 offensive rating. So I'm not going to say that like Tyrese Maxey is a grade A superstar, option one on a championship team. You give him the ball and get out of the way. But I do think we're talking about one of the better wherever you have Donovan Mitchell in our perpetual rankings of Donovan Mitchell as a top 10 offensive player, move Maxey just a little bit lower. And I think that's where Maxey is as an offensive player. And as you said, he kind of holds his own defensively. So I feel pretty good about him being an all-star.
I don't quite think I agree with that Mitchell comparison. I feel like Mitchell's
Do you think he's
more
better
dynamic.
than Mitchell?
No, I think Mitchell's pretty significantly better than
How significantly better? I don't know if we're saying anything different.
I guess that's the thing. I guess we could be into a numbers.
No. How much? I mean, do you think Mitchell is a top 5 offensive player and Maxey is like a top 20 offensive player? Because that would be a pretty significant gap.
I guess I haven't mapped it out. I feel like Mitchell's a pretty comfortable top 10 offensive player in the league. And
that's
Maxey,
your running bit this year. Yeah.
Mitchell's incredible. I've thought this about Mitchell for years now. We got in trouble a couple of years ago for saying the same sort of thing. Yeah. Off the top of my head, I'm just trying to think of players, and I'd be shocked if I had Maxey in my top 20. So I don't know how much of a gap
as an offensive player.
I think so.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if I sat down and just like mapped it out, which no one wants me to do at the moment. So I was going to do the podcast. They could say he's not top 20 offensive end.
We'll circle back to this. Back to this.
Okay.
Is it possible for you to make your pick and then we can fold back in some of the comparative points for the next 2 or 3 players? Do you want to do that?
Sure. That sounds great.
Okay. Because I feel like there's something there. And then I want to circle back to this top, we're not going to do a totally separate podcast on the top 20 offensive players, but if you sketched it out, I kind of feel like we're in agreement. I think we're violently disagreeing right now. That's my hunch.
Okay. Wait, we are violently disagreeing?
Violently agreeing. Isn't that the expression?
I thought you said disagreeing.
But I did, but I can't speak English clearly because I just said impression and expression as if they were the same words. So
I do want to say, I think Maxey's a great player. I really like Maxey, but I small offensive minded player kind of, especially the passing thing. I think the passing chops takes some off the table that I want. He's a good passer, not a great passer, which I guess you would say the same thing about Donovan Mitchell. So who knows?
I think Donovan Mitchell's a slightly better passer and probably a slightly better shooter. And thus him, that's what I was saying. Like whatever level you have Donovan Mitchell at, I think it's hard to make an argument Maxey's better, but also think about the skills and Maxey's probably not too far behind him. That's sort of my point of comparison there.
Okay.
Because he's a small guard, right?
Yes. This will definitely be something that I think about. I'm interested in this. I'm going to go on my next pick.
This is the 6th pick.
This was 6. This is pick number 6.
And you had Maxey 14th, and I love when this happens.
I had 14th.
Yes. So
this
now
guy,
if this follows suit, you'll take my 14th player.
There's actually a chance. I feel like there could be a chance here. I'm going to take another injured guy, Ben. I'm taking Paolo Banchero here. I'm taking Paolo at number 5.
Well, you have the 6th pick. You can't take Paolo at number 5.
At 6. I take Paolo at number 6.
That would definitely be higher than I would have picked Paolo.
I figured.
Okay. So I'm going to let you have the floor.
Okay. I mean, you talked about Jason Tatum being like enormous. Like then just add a little bit. Like
that's true.
He's a monster out there.
Yeah.
Like
he's the biggest person.
He's one of these kind of like forwards, like he handles the ball a good amount and whatever else. But also defensively, especially with like the Magic team that they have, you can quite literally play him anywhere on defense, right? Like he doesn't have the quickest feet. He's not going to lock down a point guard type of guy. I'm not saying he's an all D candidate, but when you have somebody that's that big and that flexible, I'm all about being able to unlock different contexts. And this is like, he's like the key context unlocker for any kind of a defense. And then on top of that, you add some of the growth that we saw. It's only 5 games, very small sample size, but I also saw it carry over in the preseason a little bit. The improvement in his decision-making, slowing down the game just a little bit on offense, which I was always concerned about in the past. If we had done this exercise last year, Ben, I would have taken Franz before him. I would have taken Franz Wagner before him for sure. That flipped this year. I'm like, I kind of believe in Paolo a little bit more in the way that he can just kind of be like, I don't know, attacking the glass offensively, just overpowering guys in the paint. You switch a smaller player on him and he just backs him down, easily gets some kind of shot. I don't know. He's kind of just you can't really attack him in the same sort of way that you would be able to attack somebody like a Tyrese Maxey or another kind of smaller guard. And I like that. I really like that. So you take all of that. You get Banchero at 6 for me.
You know what I love about this?
What?
I picked a player who is having a terrible start to the year. You picked a player who played 5 really enticing games and then was like, that's it. Let's just leave that there for Cody. I love that symmetry. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, how much stock do you want to put in 5? Number one, how much stock do you want to put in 5 games? I think you and I both agree he's better, but I think you and I would also both agree that you need a larger sample to properly contextualize and evaluate the type of improvement and the type of play we're talking about. Obviously, you need more than 5 games for like 3-point shooting. Some things you might need 5 games for. Some things after 5 games, you're like, I know that guy's first step or his ball handling or his help defense and rim instincts or whatever. I can see it in 5 games. But I think there are certain things with Paolo, namely his shooting, his pull-up shooting, some of his decision-making, and the general, what I'll call shape of his offensive style. How much value does it bring? Because, I mean, he looked very good, but they go 3-2 with him. He comes out of the lineup, and then they've basically been better. I think technically the numbers are a little bit worse, right? But they still look very good. And so it always raises this question in basketball. When a guy who's eating up all the oxygen in the room leaves the team and the team doesn't change significantly, then why are we so quick to put so much sort of love on that particular style? I don't want to go too hard into this because I think what ends up happening is you have good players that aren't quite as good as their numbers, and then they leave and get replaced, and other good players get an opportunity. So it's not like Paolo has no value in terms of the precedent that we're looking at. I do think he was a good player last year. But the question is, how much do you look at the whole package on those 5 games and say, like, dude, I'm set, top 25 player?
So when I see those numbers, like you said, like it's not a dramatic change from those 5 games he was out. Number one, small sample size. So again, this is nice. I can kind of hover behind this and be like, oh, small sample size. I can do whatever I want. Number one, I feel like what he looked like in the playoffs was closer to this season than what we maybe saw earlier in the regular season last year. So I'm like, okay, he kind of ended the season on an upward trend, and it felt like he continued that upward trend when the season started. Number two, just kind of like we were talking about with Anthony Edwards. Like, I love Franz Wagner. I love the Orlando Magic. They're my, like I said, they're my snowbird team. I love watching that team just go. It's not a great context for him, right? There's just too many guys with very similar types of skill sets. Nobody can really be the offensive engine that they need. I was going to say we. That was going to be weird, me saying we for the Magic. But I can just imagine if there were a better offensive context where not everyone else, like Jonathan Isaac is in the background. You don't necessarily need all these crazy defensive guys, right? You need somebody else that can do something more offensively. In a different one of those contexts, I can see him really flourishing and having a much bigger impact footprint than we see here. Like, it's such a weird team, and I just don't think he and Franz are necessarily a great pairing, like you were talking about. I like seeing them together, but it's not ideal in like a theoretical sense. And I think that's ultimately why some of the impact stuff just isn't as enticing as you want it to be.
I think that's a compelling argument. I don't know how much it connects to things I'm seeing yet, because I kind of want to push back a little bit. I feel like it's a good context for him that there's no other like really strong offensive players. No, you think he would do better? How would it work? He would just have way less on ball primacy next to other good offensive players, and then would get into better quick hitting actions. Or I guess I feel like it's an opportunity for him to really shine and just be given the keys to the car. And that in some sense has inflated his value as an offensive player because he has these big numbers, even though he's good, maybe not as good as the numbers suggest.
I don't necessarily care about like big gaudy box office numbers.
You don't.
Box office number. Yes. Hollywood, baby.
You know, Siskel and Ebert, 2 thumbs up. I'm talking about the audience. Yeah.
But the context, sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
That's okay.
The context that I'm talking about here, like you were just saying, is There's no real spacing around him. Like we've documented this, that there's just no one that can really shoot the ball consistently in any sort of way. I would like to see him, like, I think he's a pretty successful screener and roller. Like you get him in some of those kinds of cutting actions, or even posting up, playing at like the high post area, playing at the the nail extended sort of thing. But when he has to be the guy up top, it's like the Giannis criticism I've had for years. By the way, I love Giannis. I don't know if anyone else thinks differently, but I think Giannis is great. But it's the Giannis criticism where it's like, I don't want every offensive possession to start in his hands. I want these other things to happen. And for him to wield this just ridiculous size and athleticism he has, to kind of have the own interior gravity that he might be able to drag with his athleticism and size, and using it in those different kinds of ways. So I just want the ball out of his hands a little bit more. And I think he could maybe develop some of these other skills that would make him even more valuable.
But I also think you're talking about the Giannis offense, right? Like if he has more spacing, if he has bigger driving lanes to work with, the way that originally Bud set up the floor 19 and 20, and we've seen other teams follow this a little bit with certain players like this. It sounds like you're saying a more ideal situation for him would be, hey, we have much better shooting and spacing around you, and now we're going to force teams to load up, build a wall, collapse on you, because his superpower is his driving pressure in many ways. So it sounds like that's the argument you're making.
Yeah, 100%. They just can't shoot the ball, which hurts, Ben. It hurts.
Okay, I'm not all the way there, Cody, but I think that's a great argument. I think that's the kind of argument that not only could be valid, but if Paolo continues to play very well, will look good. Because again, we do this as a snapshot, but the interpretation of how it ages is always based on what happens with the players as they continue to grow. So in that sense, you're cheating. You're cheating by picking such a young rising player. Okay, number 7.
Yes.
Oh, this is really weird.
Mm-hmm.
This is really, really weird. I'm going to play some strategy here.
Strategy.
Yep. I'm going to draft strategically and do this a little differently. I'm going to change my pick on the fly.
Ooh, some strategery from Ben. Ooh.
Some strategery. Do I want to? No, I don't. I don't know if I want to change my pick. This is horrible. Okay. Yeah, Cody. Yeah. I'm going to change my pick.
Do it.
I'm going to take Evan Mobley.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
He. Wait. What pick is this?
This is the 7th pick.
Hey, I had him 7th on my board.
Okay.
Look at this.
Yeah.
Look at this.
There's a couple other guys I want to talk about here. It's so interesting that you took Paolo, who's not in the group that I was struggling with this pick. So we're gonna have a great postmortem in a second on this group from like 5 to 10. Mm-hmm. There was another guy I had just ahead of Mobley here. I think you're gonna pick him 8th. Yeah. That was my strategy. I wanted to get you to pick him. But the thing with Mobley is, like, whatever offensive questions we have, and we see some improvement, we see some strength improvement, we kind of have a better understanding now that teams around the league are going to use bigs like this who can handle the ball and take advantage of your ball handling and playmaking as an initiator to help some of your spacing issues. His shooting, as I said, might be a little better, and then just elite across the board defense versatility. And so what that means, much like your guy Giannis that you just mentioned, you can play lineups with him at the 4. Maybe your money lineup in certain teams in the playoffs is with him at the 5. I just think as a backbone to playoff teams, having a guy like this, you've already picked Chet. We both would have taken Wemby number 1. I just think having a versatile, rim protecting, switchable, schemable defender like this, probably going to err on the side of that. So I'll take him 7th.
I think what's really interesting is it's early in the season. On-off stuff can be really weird. It seems like, what is the pairing? I think it's Mitchell and Mobley seem to be paired more. And it seems like Garland and Allen seem to be paired more when you kind of split these two up. And those Mitchell-Mobley minutes, or at least minutes that Mobley's on, their defense is just ridiculous. Like, you think about the Cavaliers in terms of being a defensive team these last couple of years, they still are when he's on the court. And he is better this year. Like, the guy that has been, for the last couple of years, Defensive Player of the Year candidate, he's better. He's just improved. It's just too bad that he plays at the same time as Victor Wembanyama, because he's never going to win Defensive Player of the Year. But
never say never. Never say never. Yeah.
6 years ago, he could have been competing with Rudy Gobert throughout. But like you said, so flexible, He's not a classic rim protector where you're like, ooh, when you get into a playoff setting, they're going to stretch him out and it's going to be impossible for it to cover. It's like, no, he can just go out there and defend anyone at any time in any scheme. He's stronger. He's incredibly long. He can run the floor like a deer. And then, like you said, the offensive development. I don't necessarily care that he's not like going to be a knockdown 3-point shooter, but it seems like he's experimenting with it. It seems like he is knocking it down this year. I just don't necessarily trust that. But I do trust, like you said, the development in his ability to create off the bounce and off the rebound.
You trust the 5 games of Paolo, but not the shooting development of Evan Mobley.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that's fair. I'm just needling you. Mobley's, if you look at what happens defensively around the basket when he's on the court versus off the court. And I think we should have some fun with these small samples. Okay. Start the year, the Cavs teams are shooting 11% worse at the rim when Evan Mobley is on the court. 11% worse at the rim. And of course, this is sustained over multiple years in the sense that he's really good based on all the kind of different rim protection numbers you can look at. Maybe not that crazy good, but let's have some fun with small samples. He's been a terror to start the season. And I just believe it in the sense that, you know, if we're talking about like top 30 players and you want to build high quality star pieces in the postseason, he's right. It feels like he's right around that level.
I think what's interesting too is when you have these kind of defensive pieces that maybe have a little bit passing chops, you're not really boxed in for how you're going to build a team. Like you can go really in any sort of direction, which is why I love guys like Victor Wembanyama, why I love guys like Chet Holmgren, Evan Mobley, right? Like you grab somebody like, I'm not going to say anyone's name. I guess like he's not even in this draft, but you get somebody like Trae Young, right? It's pretty clear how you're going to be. It like defines the way that you're going to be playing basketball. But when you get somebody like Mobley out there, right? Even though he doesn't have the offensive punch, you can't necessarily be like, all right, our offense is settled. We're good now. You can do a bunch of different things. And ultimately that flexibility, I think maybe someone could tell me I overrate it too much, that I get too excited about that sort of flexibility. But I just think it's so important in terms of like being able to add to your team and develop and to go into different playoff settings and things like that.
It feels like it's been a hallmark on some of the recent champions as well. So I think that's one of the reasons why you give that so much weight. Okay. The 8th pick, who are you going to take?
Well, I just love injured players, apparently, Ben.
I'm pretty sure I set you up for this because I want to say this player was the 6th player I wrote down, but I really wanted Cody to talk about him.
Yeah, he was 6th. I'm interested. You made a whole video about this guy, Ben. I'm taking Franz Wagner.
Yes. So now you have to talk about the other Magic player, please.
Well, I mean, Banchero goes out and it's like, oh, it's Franz time. This is really exciting. But I think the takeaway from that stretch is that, again, like his running mate, he's not going to elevate you to a top tier offense on his own, right? He brings some offensive juice. He's just enormous, Ben. Like both of these guys are, it's like playing 2 pterodactyls on offense, right? And kind of like Banchero, his superpower is just like slow stepping to the basket and then reaching up, and all of a sudden his arm is just there. Like it's unbelievable how he's able to use that size to appear at the rim.
Wait a second. So you don't think that Paolo is in a position to be the number 1 guy on a good offense?
I don't know. The jury's out on that one.
See, that's why I didn't have him as high as you. But it's interesting to hear you say you're still wavering on that, because I feel like if we're doing our 2nd player rankings, the reason I had Franz 6th is because J-Dub, like, oh my God, what a beautiful number 2. Obviously, the defensive guys like Wemby and Chet. But then Franz Wagner is like one of the next guys that I telescope on, and we got into it in the video. When you have the combination of defense, playmaking, some off-ball stuff, and feel. He just has really great feel. Just seems like a high IQ player, screening, cutting, understanding what teams are trying to run. Just plays high-level basketball. German national team, it doesn't matter. Throw him anywhere. Throw him in the pickup game down the street. He'll be great.
I think something that sells me a little bit more about Paolo is I kind of like him as a small ball center. Like I almost feel like that's the future for him. Like Franz can switch onto a center and be big and bother you, but I'm imagining, Ben, just this utopic lineup where Paolo is literally just the 5, right? And then that causes all kinds of matchup like weirdness, right? If they're both playing the forward position, maybe I would actually take Franz, but they were like, Cody, you have to keep both these guys at the forward position. Maybe I would take Franz, but the shooting, Not sure if I trust the shooting from Franz. Obviously, I don't trust it from Banchero right now either. It's complicated. I just think both of these guys are really complicated, and I think they're really good. And I would love to be able to, go to the Temple of Delphi and be like, hey, which one of these, how are these guys going to look in 5 years? Like, are they going to be excellent, like second and third guys on a championship level team? Because I think they're pretty neck and neck in terms of where they are. But I'm just a little bit more intrigued in the just gargantuan athleticism that Banchero brings.
Fascinating. By the way, Banchero is 32% on his career after about 700 three-point attempts and 73% at the free throw line. Wagner's 33%, and I think trending up a little bit in terms of the overall three-point shooting. And then, did you know he's a career 85% free thrower?
I did know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we should bring back the term free thrower. If you turn on a game in like the 70s, you heard that a lot. Yeah, he's a strong free thrower.
I do want to say that I think the conversation between Paolo and Franz is a little bit more interesting than people would say. Like, literally on my draft board, I have Paolo 5th and I have Franz 6th, right? And so when we talk about like the bands that we'd able to draft with, I think they're neck and neck. I think it's really interesting. I probably could have picked Franz before Paolo and I would have been okay with it. But I just gave the edge a little bit to Paolo.
Okay, I think there's one more guy we have to discuss in this group, and I'm going to take him number 9th.
I think I know who you're talking about. I have him number 9, but I also think we disagree.
Wow. You think you know who I'm going to pick? Do you want to predict it? This is crazy.
Can I predict it?
Yeah.
I think you're going to take LaMelo Ball here.
That's incorrect.
Oh, good.
That is incorrect. I'm going to take Zion Williamson. Say something.
Can I say something to you, Ben?
Yeah. You understand Zion Williamson's made 2 All-Star games, right?
Zion's not on my board.
What does that mean? Oh, because of his injury?
Sell me on Zion.
You don't know what to do with him? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't know what to do with him. I was going to let you draft him. I was just like, I'm just not going to do it.
Wow. That is really punting. I mean, he played 70 games last year, played himself into decent shape. I still don't think it's the shape he needs to be in, but in 2021, because there weren't people in the stands. Cody, he was an offensive force.
Mm-hmm.
It was an absolute offensive force. And in many ways, I mean, Stan Van Gundy had the point Zion thing and all that stuff, but like in many ways, an offense to himself. When we talk about stacking up primaries that could be the number one weapon on a really good offense, he was in that group. He was in that conversation. You gave him the ball. You ran some inverted pick and roll. You got that whole Giannis thing, give him space, whatever. Just one of the all-time great finishers getting downhill. Now, that was 4 years ago. He's not at the same level. The league is not exactly the same. There's been some evolution in defenses and X's and O's and things like that. But he was really good player last year. I think we take that for granted in the sense that he wasn't where we wanted him. We want him to be a top 20 player. We want him to show us how he could be a top 10 player. And he wasn't that last year. But, I mean, dudes that average 23 points a game and are efficient and can get down and pass. And as he got to the end of the year, we saw that in the playoff/play-in game that he played against the Lakers. Like, there aren't many players in the league that can do that. And so I'm taking that, and I'm taking the fact that Zion is still only 24 years old and saying, okay, I don't know right now. I can't say right now that he's going to get back to where he was in 2021. I can't say that he's going to come in and be in shape and have this perfect thing. But I also think that when he comes back, I expect him to, maybe not immediately, but I expect him to at some point hit a level where when we stack up these players, it's going to be hard to have other guys to say, yeah, you can play at that all-star, fringy all-star level. So he's got to be picked. He's got to be discussed in this group.
So in the one game that you consider to be a playoff game that he played, I will admit that in this non-playoff game, the play-in game last year.
The non-playoff game where they were eliminated by losing, but if they won, they advanced. That one?
Yep. So you count the in-season tournament because you can be eliminated. That's a playoff game too.
No, you're not eliminated from the championship run at all. No. You're eliminated from the NBA Cup.
No one wants to hear this argument. Anyway, in that game, Zion was incredible. Like, absolutely incredible. There's a chance, if I remember correctly, I didn't look this up ahead of time. He had 40 points or something like that, gets injured before the end of the game, and I think the Lakers end up winning. And that's kind of the last time we see this. And like that Zion, if you're like, hey, we have full tilt, healthy Zion, and we're going to play in one game, where are you going to take it? I'm looking at this board and I'm like, I don't know. He might be flirting with the top 5 right now. Like, maybe I pick him as high as I picked Paolo, right? Like, it's just an incredible talent. But at the end of the day, 2021, Ben. Like 2021, like that's a different time. That's a different epoch. You know, you're referencing just like the Cretaceous period at this point. You know, like dinosaurs roamed the earth when we discussed him as being one of the great finishers of all time.
Okay, hold on. You're being a little, I think a little harsh. Although I do love this bit and want to hear you describe more elderly periods of the earth from way back when. But if you look at Zion's numbers last year, for instance, for the whole year, which includes some of the season where he was getting into better shape. Now we're not talking about the end of the year that he's at a 10, but if he was like at a 4, he went to an 8 or something like that. There was some clear improvement in his conditioning, and I thought his play by the end of the year. So his whole season, he was still 27 points per 75, plus 4%. He can pass a little and create with that rim pressure. And then if you look at like the kind of impact numbers that we look at in the box score, like 86th percentile in offensive box plus minus, 88th percentile in overall box plus minus. I mean, again, I just want to put it in perspective. Like, just because we're not saying he's a peak top 15 or 20 player doesn't mean that a lesser version of that falls off a cliff necessarily.
Okay. And you might be right. Maybe I'm being kind of a stick in the mud right now in terms of this, but even like, let's grant him some health. You know, I'm also skeptical of like the defensive flexibility. Like, if he actually makes a playoff run, like he's actually in the playoffs, Ben, and a team all of a sudden has a chance to scheme against him, I just don't necessarily, I don't trust his ability to, you know, fly around the court at a heavy minute load for a period of time. I do think his offense is basically unschemable. Like, I think the way that he's able to get to the basket, able to move off ball and attack the rim, I'm not concerned about a team being able to just easily build a wall against that. I agree with like that. If we talk about the great superpowers in the league, like he has one, right? That finishing ability, that strength, that athleticism is a superpower. But I taken some of those concerns defensively, and I taken the health part. And, you know, maybe it is a little bit of a bit that I just leave him off the board, but I think ultimately I'm like, I'm just going to let you pick him, because the case that I can make, I'm not going to have my heart in it then.
Well, I've done it. Let's do one more, and then we're going to have to come back for part 2. Let's round it out at an even 10.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Am I sure what?
Do you want to cut it off at 9, or should we go to 10?
Oh, I see what you're, because this is the natural end to this group. That's what you're saying?
It feels like it.
Do you just want more time to stall to think about your pick? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the next guy I have on my board, I actually don't want to pick.
Okay, well, you're going to have to take him because you have the 10th pick. But if you want to stop there, I'm happy to stop there, because to me, this is the partitioning of this kind of group. And I think if we look back at the players in this group, we've selected Maxey, Banchero, Evan Mobley, Franz Wagner, Zion Williamson. Do you feel, how do you feel about those players being in the same group? And B, if we flip the order around, I mean, like you just said, if Zion, if you thought you were going to get play-in game Zion, you know, would he go 5th instead of 9th or something like that? It's just an interesting group to me, because I think there's arguments to be made in different directions for a lot of players right now.
Yeah. No, I think that grouping is fair. I mean, obviously I had Maxey quite a bit lower than the other guys, but I think the case you made, the fact that I'm probably biasing a little too much on what I see this season, like had we done this last year, I'm pretty sure if I pulled up my sheet from last year, he was flirting with top 10 as well, right? So I think it's probably right in range of where I could end up. So I do see a pretty natural grouping here, and I do think that the next few guys I'm looking at, I would describe as like talented, but complicated. It's a little Avril Lavigne out there, Ben. Like I'm just not 100% sold on some stuff, and I think we have to have some tough conversations.
The whole next group is going to be wild, and that's why I'm glad you paused us. I think that was a good point. To support us, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. You can also sign up for our memberships on YouTube. We now have a couple different tiers, so you can get extra videos and our game series and whatnot for $5 a month. You can also just get these podcasts for $2 a month and just generally support us, our live stream podcast, which is very exciting. Although when you do the top 25, it's not so exciting, Cody, to do it live and realize that there's just I mean, I actually don't think in the years we've been doing this we've ever really edited and undone anything we've ever said. But there's something horrifying about doing this particular show live and having to sort through all of this. So Victor Wembanyama goes first. I picked on the odds. Cody picked on the evens. Anthony Edwards second. Jalen Williams, J-Dub third. Chet Holmgren fourth. Tyrese Maxey fifth. Paulo Banchero sixth. Evan Mobley seventh. Franz Wagner eighth. Zion Williamson ninth. That's where we will pause today. Any parting thoughts before we wrap this one?
I love this podcast. I love drafting things. I love drafting things.
What do you want to draft next?
Wow. That's a great question. Well, I guess I want to draft the last 16 players on this list. That's what I want to draft next.
I meant as like a different topic. Do you want to do top play-in games of all time?
Top. How many play-in games have there been? Like 8?
Well, how many are there every year? There's like
2,
a little tournament.
4? Oh, I
3,
guess there's
3 in each conference, right?
I think what play-in game with that? Was that the Heat coming back against the Bulls?
No, there's 3 in each conference.
No.
I feel like I'm
sorry. I jumped ahead. I jumped ahead here. I think what the game that stands out to me is I think the Miami Heat coming back against the Bulls, or was that the Hawks?
Oh my! Are you talking about the Heat when they went to the finals?
Yeah, that run.
Yeah.
Like they almost lost to the Bulls in the play-on game, and I think they were down pretty considerably. And they're like, actually, let's just win. And then they did, and then they knocked out the Bucks, and then they knocked out everybody, including the Celtics.
Oh, this bit is going to go forever. This I actually just meant the top player performances, like Zion's 40 points in 36 minutes last year, or John Morant going into Golden State and stomping on the logo there. I was just thinking about actually Curry versus the Lakers was an amazing in 2021. That was an amazing performance. Yeah. So
back when Zion still played basketball. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this one. And as always, we hope you're having a great day.